Greetings, I'm Chris Paul. This is my documentary on castles and Salt Mocklock. This is Command Castle. Let's get into it. King Edward I is the first monarch to have ever lived in Command Castle. He built a castle over 700 years ago. He faced a battle with a horrible Welsh army in 1219. He was later that year chose the next Archbishop of Canterbury. This is the King's Chambers. Command Castle is obviously a castle built made of stone. It's also built on natural rock formations that were already here at the time. It's surrounded by water and it's obviously elevated to a high degree, meaning it's got high level defences. It's got 4 baileys, which are the outer walls. Typically, during the time we had wooden castles, we called them bailey castles. Baileys being the castle because that was the wood. And then progressively, as we started building stone castles, such as Conway Castle, the bailey became referred to as the outer walls of the castle. And one of my favourite things of Conway Castle is it has 4 baileys, so 4 outer walls, increasing the defence to the castle and defending the outer kingdom and its surrounding city. Hi, we're returning back to Conway Castle at my college in the Greensbury room, just so I can show you this little 3D digital model of Conway Castle here. As you can see, well, actually, it doesn't have it on the model actually. Looks like that. But yeah, it's surrounded by a river and a lake, which is really good for its defensibility. You know, obviously, on attackers have got to cross that river and the lake to get to the castle. It's also really good for trade routes. You know, travelling goods such as food, crops in and out of the castle. Also good for troop transport. You know, getting troops back into the castle and out into the wars. Also, Common Castle is also built on top of a natural form of rock called bedrock, which is actually a form of volcanic rock. And despite not having any, you know, volcanic activity within the UK or Britain, we still have volcanic rock because whilst the earth was forming, you know, volcanoes were everywhere and forming all the land and the landscape that basically we see today. So then that's how bedrock was formed through a volcanic process. So when the planet split its land masses between the 2 different supercontinents that were around in history, when after the second supercontinent, which is called Pangaea, because Pangaea is the second supercontinent to have happened in the Earth's life cycle. But as that was happening, land split off from each other, obviously, and England was in fact, you know, within a large mass where bedrock would have been, well, yeah, England and the UK would have been in a large mass where bedrock would have been formed. So then there was a lot of that lying around across, you know, Europe, Britain, UK, and everywhere else. So we have some of that natural volcanic material that the Welsh built the castle on top of, which is actually really durable rock that was really hard to get through, which, you know, means attackers can't dig underneath the castle easily. It's also obviously because of that, it's also quite tight forms and the cost on top of that as well, with its own incredibly high walls. We're talking like at least 15, 16 meters at its lowest height. Obviously, with the outer walls being at least 30 meters in height at the peak, and then as well the surrounding city wall goes about 6-8 miles out. So back when this was originally built, which I believe was 16th century, that was that whole 6-8 miles was the entire width of the city of Conway at the time. Obviously, it's now bigger due to population growth and stuff like, and new stuff being built, like houses and expansion and all that. But back then, it was only that sort of 8 miles wide. And Conway Castle also had about 4 bailies, which are the outer walls. So back when we had Moss and Bailey castles, obviously that was different. So the bailies were the castle itself, because you had the moat, which was the man-made moat, and then you had like the bailey, which was basically the hill, and then you got the wooden castle on top of the bailey. But then as time moved on and we started to make more durable material and heavy material such as stone, that term sort of changed. Instead of being like a man-made hill, it then became known for the word for the outer walls. So Conway Castle originally had 4 bailies surrounding it, which meant it could hold a lot more land, a lot more control of the area. It was also meaning it had multiple areas where it can defend itself from, which is also handy as well, seeing as Conway itself was built on top of a natural hill that was inside a valley between 2 other hills, and then had the lake within that, which is actually pretty ingenious, because that makes it really, really easy to protect itself and it was also covered in forests and Greenland as well, which also made it hard for opposing forces to force their way through and invade. They also, Conway, it could still be a usable castle today. Sure, it's a bit in ruin now, with age and how it's sort of gone into ruin a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. Because it's not too similar to Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. Edinburgh Castle is actually still currently the only working castle in the UK. It's still being used by the military today. It's been refurbished and it's been partially rebuilt, in recent years. And like obviously Rockmore's been updated, but they still have the old cannons which are still functional as well. Again with Edinburgh Castle, well, you can still see the damage that was left during the last medieval war that it encountered. And Edinburgh Castle also had a big role in the Second World War, in the Blitz. Blitz that was over Scotland in a way, and was a huge war effort involvement. But Conway Castle could still be used. It's not a fortress, it's just a museum. But it could be, sure, you have to do a bit of repair, but most of the castle's actually still there. It's just, there's a bit of holes and roof glass, but that's all good. That's stuff you can easily repair. They've even found a new room that's in between the chapel and the king's chambers. So clearly, they're finding new stuff in there. That's all around. That's like all of the castle. So there's probably still other hidden rooms around the castle that are usable, that are, can be used. And then also you can see on this model here as well that there are a few sets of bridges. So there is a railway bridge which is new. They actually tried to build the support that was directly next to the castle to actually look part of it by using the same sort of stone and same sort of methods and stuff. But that is obviously a lot more modern. But the older bridges that were originally there is 2 to 3 of those. There's a footbridge, which was originally the footbridge as well, and then there's another one which was for cars and other vehicles. That was originally used for horses and carts and stuff like that as well. Which obviously we as the people don't use that anymore, because we've got cars and we've got vans and lorries and whatever. But we've got there's still some roads which have been able to get around, because we've still got the original stone which was there. They're completely intact and unharmed. And you've still got all the gardens that are along as well. We've got the old trebuchet, which is stood right outside, facing the lake, which I think they do still demonstration with that trebuchet, so it's all usable as well, which is really nice. Yeah, I would say this Cromwell Castle is probably my favourite castle within the UK. Obviously, because of how defensive it is, the fact that it's got those 4 bays and that it's mostly intact, and you can see how wide it is, how high it is, how great the structure as well. Right, obviously this is a spiral staircase, and instead of in castles a spiral staircase being an aesthetic design for being extravagant, it was actually a practical design, because the handle was on the inside on the pillar that the spiral was centered around, and from that, what that would allow is for the troops who are defending the castle to come down on the wider end of the steps, and would also allow them to fight with their main hand, with their swords and the axes and whatever. They were actually able to come down and defend and be more stable on the stairs, whilst it would then force attacking sieges to be forced up on the narrow end and to hold that handhold, so then they will have their weapons in their offhand, in their not offensive hand, the non-offensive hand, which would put them at a disadvantage. Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to my documentary. This is my HEMA demonstration. HEMA stands for Historical European Martial Arts. I particularly do German longsword, but I also combine it with other variations of European longswords, such as French and English. And I will be going through some of the techniques and demonstrating some of the maneuvers, and let's get into it. So, first thing I'll show you, called a flourish. And a flourish was not used in combat, but what it was used for was intimidation, because it showed that you're more practiced as a swordsman or as a soldier. So you go into a duel or anything like that, any form of combat. Before you started off, you do a flourish to show you're more experienced, and in order to potentially intimidate your opponents, and they would slip up and give you a better chance of winning. So basic flourish is that simple, and a more advanced flourish is it uses the standard basic flourish, but it's a bit more flashy. So it has more of a element of making it look more advanced, making you look more practiced and experienced. Now we bring up my other actor.
If that's how I'm putting it.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. First of all, we'll demonstrate some basic moves and basic blocking. So, everyone obviously always knows that block, because that's in every single sword martial art known to man. That is literally in every single one. So if we were to demonstrate, for instance, if you were to do either a basic strike or an overhead strike, we can show them how it's done. So that's a block, that's a basic block. There's also this block, if you do one of those strikes again. There's also that block, so you block it with this, you hold the blade in the hand, because there's a technique called half swording, where you can hold the blade to get more control. And now we'll be going to the next step of not just blocking but parrying. So there's one basic one of combining. Well, there's 3 steps. There's blocking, avoiding, and parrying. And one basic version of that is to do all 3. So if you do another strike again. So evade, block, and then a counter. That's a parry. And then if we're going back into half swording again, block and then twist. And then that's another parry you can use for that. And you can also use half swording in not just parrying or blocking capabilities, we can also use it in offensive, where you just get tighter, faster control. Another technique where you hold the blade, actually, because you can hold the blade, and it was done, because you're not going to cut yourself on the blade unless you're sliding your hand along the edge of the blade. If you keep your hand still on that blade, you're not cutting yourself, because it's not the act of pressing that cuts you, it's the act of pressing and sliding, because that's how a blade works. So you grip the blade with both hands and then use the pommel as a bat, as a bludgeon weapon. So you grab it and then hit. That disorientates. It's really good for armoured opponents, because with a sword, with a blade of a sword, you couldn't get past plate armour. The only way you could get past that is through stabbing in between the links. So in order to do that, because obviously your opponent had another weapon and was armoured, so it could defend themselves, one of the few ways to do that was to have a bludgeoning weapon, so you hit them in the head or somewhere else, disorientating them with the bludgeoning, with blunt force trauma, and then you go back into a half swording or standard form, and then you thrust in between the links, stabbing through, and then killing them. Because another thing as well, you can't slice through plate armour, you can't slice through chainmail, you can only stab through those two. And in Gambeson, which was underneath both the plate and the chainmail, you can slice through that, but especially if it's full Gambeson, you need a minimum of 12 strikes to actually cut through, all the way through. So you're pretty well protected with all that armour on. So that is the whole point of that. So that's kind of that. I suppose now we're sort of going to like a full-on demonstration, I suppose.
We full sword fighting.
Oh, one more thing. I use this stance because I find it easier to HEMA stance is actually around about here, where you can spin that. So, but I sometimes switch between the two. But as we're doing mostly European martial art manoeuvres, I will be using the HEMA stance. And another technique as well, actually, I forgot to mention as well, that was in most longsword forms, is actually, because it's a much larger sword, it reaches up to here on me. This is because it's about 36 inches, right? So this is long sword configuration, war sword configuration is about here, great sword here. So a long sword will weigh 1.4 kilos, a war sword will weigh 2.2 to 2.3 kilos, and then a great sword would be 5 kilos. So they're all pretty light, but yeah, but one of the maneuvers you would use for this, because it's all about momentum and speed, is you actually swing it around a lot. So you pick up momentum and speed and power. So you get that force. Because obviously, as a weapon, it's a force multiplier. So now we'll get into it. Martial arts, there's a lot of feinting in my so you feint and fake strike. So one thing you can do that is you feint and then twist around. And another form of this as well is that, because this is a medium length weapon, so if you're say out of range, I'm not going to hit from here. What I can do, because I need that, if I want the extra reach, I can bring my hand a bit further down, and then I just go into the strike and let go with one hand, and I gain a bit more reach. So I go in for the strike and then a feint and a strike. So we'll try maybe adding some of that in.
Okay.